Sorry. Hello and good evening to everybody who has made their way to Gray's Inn this evening for our first event for Neurodiversity Celebration Week. I'm currently quite distracted by the noise out there. I don't know if anyone else is. So I'm just going to ask the door is shut.
I'm finding this very visually disturbing.
So some of you are listening on the live stream, so hopefully you can hear us, but please do flag if you can't, and we will raise our voices as much as we can on the panel. So I'm going to do some introductions, and then we've received a number of really helpful and insightful questions in advance of tonight's panel meeting. So I want to go through them and then also give you guys the opportunity to raise questions with us as well as people who want to hear more about this particular topic. So this event is all about tips and tricks for neurodivergent practitioners and pupils. And the reason why we thought this would be a good idea is because we did an event a couple of weeks ago about pupillage applications and pupil interviews and that sort of thing. And we thought we need to do the next step. We need to know what's it like in real life for those who are in practice if you have a neurodivergent condition or think you might have one, and what to do and how to get the right support. And I also know that some of you here and some of you on the live stream may be not neurodivergent or not realise you're neurodivergent yourself and be trying to help colleagues or be a clerk or perhaps manager, and also wanting to support members of your Chambers community, which is wonderful. I'm glad that there are allies at this event as well. So I'm going to introduce the panel, and hopefully we have everyone in. Yes, we do. Wonderful. So on my right or left is Adam Richardson, and he's a barrister at 1 Essex Court, and he practices in equity and trusts law.
General common law.
General common law. There we go. I did have this written down. Let me just double check it. It was Chancery and General Common Law. There we go. And on my right, I have Cheryl Jones, who's Deputy Insolvency and Company Court Judge, a recorder, property and insolvency barrister at 3 Paper Buildings. And then on my far right is Julian Norman, who's also a judge, recorder in the Family Court, immigration, regulatory and public law barrister at Goldsmiths Chambers. So I don't know if any of you want to introduce also any relevant neurodivergencies or opening remarks.
I'm quite happy to go on that one. I have ADHD. I was relatively recently diagnosed, and when asked why at my seer and venerable age I might be bothered to do that, the answer is because it has given me a sense of stability that I've lacked my entire life. That is that I know there are reasons for some of my odder shores of conduct. And I have, over the years I've been at the bar, developed, I think, quite a few coping mechanisms without even realising what I was coping with. And I'd be really happy to share that with anybody else this evening.
I'm Julian. I was diagnosed before I was called to the bar, actually, with autism spectrum disorder. Back then it was called Asperger's. And likewise, I think I've developed a number of coping mechanisms, which again I would be also happy to share.
Adam, I was diagnosed dyslexic at a very early age. Not really sure how it affected me though. I guess I suppose I've only got experience in my own mind, but happy to talk about my experience coming to the bar with dyslexia.
As I've already introduced myself, but I was diagnosed with ADHD after the birth of my son 2 years ago. Quite common that women get diagnosed after they have a child, I hear. And I also have significant sensory processing disorder as well as a background in mental health as well. So many women and many people with neurodiversities also have that as their story. So I'm quite happy to talk about that aspect as well. Right, so we received a number of really insightful questions before this event. Okay, so next next question that we got was all about what advice would you give as a panel about disclosing your neurodivergence to others, in particular your pupil supervisor at the start of your time as a pupil, and then in terms of your clerks or your practice managers and others in chambers. So we had this question, Adam, when we were doing our talk on pupillage and pupils applications, and we thought about whether or not we had a general view on whether or not people must or should disclose their diagnosis in application forms in pupillage interviews. And we had a number of quite nuanced answers. I don't know if you want to.
So no, I recall I didn't disclose. I've sort of kept it to myself for the longest time until I joined this organisation. I don't know why. I'm not ashamed of it. I just thought I didn't want to be judged on that basis, and this organisation has helped me realise that there isn't a stigma and there shouldn't be a stigma around this. And I wish I had now disclosed it. Makes a lot more sense why I can't read my own handwriting for one. But I have another list of traits, as long as my arm, that are advantages as a result of my neurodivergence. So I think declare it, and I think we're, as an organisation, pro declaring it. But if you're not comfortable doing so, we're not here to force you. You know, everyone's on their own journey, but I'm pro disclosure.
Exactly what I said at the event was, you will all be at different stages of how you feel about it. Some people are never going to be comfortable talking about it. I have never told my dad that I have ADHD. I don't know why, but that's just something that I'm dealing with as a person. That's just going to be, everyone's journeys are going to be different with that. And no one should feel forced. It's really, to me, it's very analogous to being outed as somebody who is gay, for example. It's not exactly the same, but I can certainly see some parallels with that. And it has to be something you do on your own terms. And that's my headline view. I think what would be relevant to know is things like, if you need things like extra time in pupillage interviews, if you need reasonable adjustments, if you need the format of your written application or your written, say you might be sent or pleased to write a discussion argument or something like that, if you need adjustments to be made to that process, the vast majority, if not all chambers, certainly mine and Cheryl's chambers, will make reasonable adjustments in respect of those types of things. And it's important to make the chambers aware of those so that they know and then can make those adjustments. But if that chambers is not one that is willing to make reasonable adjustments and is not willing to be a place that is going to be accessible to you, is that really somewhere that you want to go? It is also a fair thing to think about. But certainly, I would say, compared to when I applied to chambers 10 years ago, I think chambers, all chambers generally, have got much better. Not all of them, but certainly much better at doing applications. I know that there was a chambers that previously asked for handwritten applications. You would love this. On unlined paper to apply for pupillage. And I understand that they have not that recently, but not that long ago, scratch that. So there is certainly some progress, but some chambers will still have application forms that are going to be difficult to follow. And it may be that you can ask for it in a different format. And I know that Cheryl has much to say about that for our chambers as well.
We try to make ourselves as accessible as possible. Speaking for myself, when I made my applications 28 years ago, I think it is now, must be 28 years ago when I was making my applications. Had I been diagnosed and I wasn't, I would not have said a word. Because at that stage, it wasn't understood, particularly amongst women. I was already different enough. I came to the bar when I was older, with a very weird background. And I was diagnosed relatively recently, so it was simply a question of me bouncing into the clerks and going, hey, because I'm sort of let it all hang out kind of girl. I bounced in, guess what, guys? I'm ADHD. And they went, yeah. We sort of worked that out. And it's just not been an issue for me. My biggest issue was because I think of my ADHD, undiagnosed, and a couple of other things. I suffered very badly from depression. It took me a long, long time before I was able to be open. I was open about that long before I knew I was ADHD. But I took a decision probably about 10, 12 years ago to be fully open about the stress of being a barrister and about my own struggles with depression, suicidal fixation. And, you know, I do a talk for the pupils every year. I tell them about it because I think, for me, disclosing it encourages them to also disclose it. But in terms of when to do it, for you personally, I think that is a decision you have to make. I think it's better to make it thinking through it and giving yourself a target of when you feel you're going to be able to share with people. Because it's really bad if it sort of comes out in a way that you blurt it out because something happens and you have maybe a meltdown. It's better if people know that that's part of you, and it's managed, and it can be managed. And people do forgive you for the meltdowns. They forgive me. I get them. I get meltdowns in chambers sometimes. I'm not talking about breakdowns. I'm talking about when you reach the end of your tether and every single bit of you is sort of buzzing, and you start shouting or you burst into tears. And I think it's better that people know before you get to that point. And if you're coming as a pupil, certainly to ask, we really want to know, because we will take as many steps as we can. We're not perfect, but we take the steps that we can. And I think most chambers are pretty good now. Many chambers are pretty good now.
Certainly if you were applying to a law firm,
Yes.
obviously I've done a little bit.
Yeah.
The Equalities Act would make
Yeah.
that part of the disclosure under the voluntary end, which
Yes.
is the sort that gives you, I'm gay, I'm straight, I'm not. I have some
Yes.
bits and pieces. Problem I find mostly is a diagnosis in something is all very well and good, but until you understand what that means to you, you can't then suggest the ideal fixes for this might be likely to happen, please can I work from home one day a week, or whatever. Obviously the bar is great, you can do exactly what you'd like. When you're in a law firm, things are very different. But you do have the support of the HRT behind you, which doesn't quite have the same.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, I totally agree. The Equality Act, for those who don't know, that will apply to pupils. It will apply to staff who are working in the chambers. It's a very useful framework for barristers as well. Although you're self-employed, unless you're employed by CPS or other organisations, you're going to have a different set of rights to someone in an employed position in a solicitor's firm. But it doesn't mean that there's not framework and guidance around, firstly, say things like access to the court system, to the justice system. You know, the code of practice that if some of you are at bar school, you know, that's imbued with these themes and this code of practice that we all share as professionals about not discriminating against others, not discriminating against our clerks or clients. And that sort of thing is going to be, or ought to be, part of how we are seeking adjustment. But I also agree with the second part of what you said, which is it takes time to work out what works for you. It really does. And certainly I would think back to 2 years ago, when I got my diagnosis, I was like, didn't really know what worked that well. It took probably, I'm still working it out. I need to learn from all of you guys this evening. But it takes time to really work out what works for you. And then you can sort of trial things with your clerks, which leads to my next point. Like, how do you then ask for help? How do you then ask for adjustments? Well, firstly, you've got to trial things and work things out for yourself, work out where your limits and your boundaries are, to be able to then know what those adjustments are. But it can be difficult, and sometimes it's useful to see a list of example adjustments so that then you can say, okay, well, I think that could work for me. Like, you know, please don't call me, please email me in writing instead. That sort of thing can be a useful thing if it was listed somewhere. I'm conscious, Julian, that I've missed you on the question about disclosure generally. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to say.
Only really that you need to know what it is you're looking for when you make the disclosure. I mean, if you're just chatting to other members of chambers and you want to say, by the way, I'm autistic, then that's one thing. But if you're making a sort of formal disclosure with the anticipation of building in adjustments, you need to know what you're disclosing and why. Otherwise it's just sharing information. So one thing that I struggle with hugely is auditory processing. So some of those adjustments I can make for myself. I can use Google Chrome, which has its own attempt at captions. You can get programs that will provide captions for you, and that's quite helpful. Sometimes you can ask for additional breaks if you're on a video link. And most panels or judges are very good about providing those. And so for some things like training, I don't necessarily need to disclose an entire shopping list of diagnoses. That's of interest only to me. The only thing that the person who's providing that training needs to know is that I won't be able to access the materials unless there are captions on it. So don't feel obliged to give an entire list. You can just tell them what the problem is and what the adjustment is that you're seeking, depending on context.
And remember, there's not an exhaustive list of reasonable adjustments that you can choose from. It's so different in every scenario, which makes it very difficult for the court sometimes when you're doing a reasonable adjustments case. But it is dependent on the person and the circumstances as to what's a reasonable adjustment. And if you think it's reasonable for you, I think that's important to disclose that early doors.
So what I would want to know is a lot of people have asked us about diary management and how you tell your clerks about building in time that you might need that perhaps neurotypical people might not require in the same way, back-to-back hearings, back-to-back conferences, that sort of thing. So how have you, if any of you have, communicated to clerks or what adjustments have you made or anything to your diaries that you might advise anyone here on? So do you have any diary management tips? Yeah.
I learned, and it took me a very long time to do this, but I learned this word no. So when my clerks insisted, oh, Mr. Richardson, we've got a lovely brief for you, sir. Fill your diary, don't worry, I'll make you lots of money. No, I need time for myself. I approach burnout because I work very hard. We all work very hard. It's a difficult profession. But, as a result of dyslexia, I have to take extra time reading. So as a result of that, I need to build that time in. And your clerks need to respect your limits. And I know it's a two-way street, and everyone's always afraid to say to their clerks no, because they're worried that they won't be clerked properly. It's got to be a give and take relationship. And when I realized that actually I could say no and nothing bad happened, it was sort of a life-changing event for me. And that's how I manage my diary.
I think for me, I agree, being able to say no, but also I need not to be tempted. So sometimes my clerks will say, oh, do you want this case? And I'm like, I really want this case, but I know I shouldn't, but I really want this case. So it'd be like a new solicitor or something interesting, or I feel obliged, whatever it is. And I've had to recently tell my clerks, don't even tell me about it, because I will take it and I can't. And so just kind of being aware of that might be enough. You might feel that you can just say no and that's fine. But for some of you, you might feel like once you're tempted, your impulse might be to still say yes, for example. So that's my additional tip.
Impulse control is my biggest problem. When I'm in that sort of, oh look, let me find some lovely dopamine here, I will accept everything. It's all, oh yeah, this looks really interesting, and then about a few weeks down the line, I'll be totally crushed because everything will need to be done at once. And of course, I won't have managed my time as well as I should have done, because I've got weeks to do all of this thing. And then suddenly I've got 1 week left and 2 weeks worth of work. And so I'm not probably the best person to ask about diary management, to be honest. I have an arrangement similar to yours with the clerks. Which is I will phone up one of there's two clerks particularly that help me. I will phone one of them up and go, I think I'm about to get overwhelmed. And they will put a stop on my diary. And they will put a note in to say that any work that comes in has to be filtered through them first. They will still tempt me from time to time if they think it's something that I can really do. So I still occasionally get overwhelmed, but that's the only way I've found to stop myself from overloading myself, because I get all excited and think I can move mountains. And then the difficulty, which I'm sure we'll come to at some stage, which is time management for people with ADHD, the executive functioning side of it still is an issue for me. So it's still occasionally a bumpy ride for me. I'm not in clear, quiet sailing waters, and I have accepted I never will be. This is me, this is my life, and this is how I have to cope with it.
I have a very understanding partner.
That too.
But I think one thing I would say from my own experience, I was a solicitor before I transferred to the bar, and the executive function requirements of being a solicitor were very, very different. And my experience did not work for me at all. You had to account for every 6 minutes of your time, file everything in triplicate, with one copy to go in one place, another copy to go in another place. And the better you were at law, the less law you got to do and the more people management you had to do. That I found entirely overwhelming. And you had to do it in a situation where the lights were constantly buzzing and people interrupted you every 3 seconds. It was exceptionally difficult, and I burnt out quite spectacularly. I haven't had any of those problems at the bar. So I've gone from somebody who I thought at one stage I would need support to work at all, to the stage where I don't. And that is because the bar really is set up in some ways in a quite old-fashioned way. It's set up, the mechanisms for it are very much set up for public school boys who go on to Oxbridge and have a scout looking after them, and then they come to the bar and they've got a clerk looking after them. And when I came to the bar and discovered that every evening a clerk was going to phone me or email me, it's now on an automatic setup thing and say, this is what you need to do tomorrow, and here's your papers attached to it. This was like sort of going straight up to heaven. So a lot of the executive function is built in at the bar, which it isn't at a law firm. So anybody who was considering employed practice, my advice would be swerve it, but yeah, other people have different things. So I think to some extent, being at the bar for somebody who's got similar issues to me is the absolute ideal place to be, because I can focus on the actual law. I don't tend to feel too overloaded too often because I'm a massive nerd. And if it's about immigration law, I will do that all day and all night, and I'll be very happy doing it. So finding an area of law that is your particular interest is also a really good idea. Yeah, this feels like being paid to do my favourite thing all the time. It's great.
I think that leads nicely on to one of the next questions that we got, which was from a pupil, I think, who was currently doing a criminal pupillage and is finding being in the magistrates' courts and the Crown courts and the back-to-back or multiple hearings listed at 10 o'clock at the same time in multiple different courtrooms, one of them in Basildon, one of them in Basingstoke, is unhelpful, and they're finding that very tough. And the question was, how do I do this as a criminal pupil? Is this the right sort of setting for me? They didn't, I think, disclose what their diversity was, but
I think it's me.
It was it.
Is that you?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
ASD.
Okay.
And I'm finding, like, criminal law is the area that I love.
Right.
But I'm finding so much of it impossible. Not impossible, I shouldn't say that. 'Cause I believe I can do it, but within really specific boundaries, and I'm finding that difficult.
Yes, it is incredibly difficult. I did, when I transferred to the bar, I did do criminal law, and having to be in 4 courts, and sometimes literally swapping seats, so from prosecution to defence, and then defence back to prosecution in the same courtroom but different cases. And then, of course, the huge responsibility of what happens if you get it wrong. by confusing two cases or using the wrong name, things that are probably only quite trivial but feel like the end of the world. Yeah, I can see, for the benefit of those watching online, the vigorous nodding at the back there. I think there's two things that can be done. One is to talk to the clerks and say, I can only do, fix however many you can do, but that is going to annoy the clerks. And they may well say, well, actually at the junior end, we need people who are going to be able to do this. One is to get more senior more quickly and take only, so that you've got those really long cases, but that carries with it its own issues. The other thing is to look at quasi-criminal work. So I do, for example, some professional discipline work. Nursing and midwifery counsel work, general dental counsel if you don't have a teeth phobia like I do, general medical counsel, there's all sorts of those which fit very much in the same skill set, but are, I think, very, very well suited for people on the spectrum, because you're going at a more sensible pace, but you've also got one case to deal with, often thousands and thousands and thousands of pages to deal with, but that's fine. You can do that, and I find it really interesting work. So that would be one thing to consider looking at, is not leaving crime exactly, but moving sideways. So there are things that you can do there. There are alternatives without it being crime or nothing, if that makes sense.
What I would say, so someone I know very well, who these two know too, was at the criminal bar in terms of the self-employed bar for 10 years, and recently moved into employed bar, not the CPS, but into a very academic type of criminal law at the Court of Appeal Criminal Division. And she is autistic, and she is in heaven, because it's so academic. It's also quasi-judicial, and so there are other types of criminal law, criminal barrister roles out there that are not just restricted to that kind of quite classic criminal law type approach. And she's much happier in that position than she was ever in the courts. I mean, she didn't even like cross-examination or witness handling or any of the theatre and the fakeness of it all. So yeah, there's definitely other options out there. But on the other hand, I do know other, mainly people who have a mixed practice. I have to say, I don't think I know many who do pure crime. And I think it might also be because many criminal practitioners aren't taking on a mixed practice for obvious other reasons. I do know other neurodivergent criminal practitioners. Certainly, I can think of a dyslexic criminal practitioner who's doing very well.
I know at least one senior criminal practitioner with all the ADHD.
Yeah.
I know a few with ADHD, but none with ASD.
Yeah.
No, I think that's possibly fair. I don't know anything about it. Really, obviously,
I think it appeals more to ADHD. It's more
yeah,
like dopamine central, isn't it?
The spinning of plates. Yeah. So I think it's really fair, and it might be that we need to really advocate for changes within the criminal system to make it much more accessible. Because, well, we all know that many people who are unfortunate enough to be part of the criminal justice system as the defendant are quite likely to have to undiagnosed ASD or ADHD, and having the benefit of a autistic counsel could be the first person who really spots it and helps them, and that could be
That's how
incredibly.
I always like to think.
Yeah.
I
get it.
I do love it.
I know. And that drive and that passion and that kind of, as you say, hyper-focused fascination with that area of law can be the motor that keeps that going.
Yeah,
And
sorry,
I
I worked for the Public Defender Service in Gloucestershire for 5 years. And I think it's what James was saying, you have to say no.
Yeah.
And you have to ask the people around you, the clerks, the other people, to say, no, I'm not ready yet. Can you find me a room which doesn't back onto thousands of people, a safe space where you can focus on the client and not get distracted by just the noises coming out of the door. So yeah, use other people wisely. Obviously, don't tell them your life history. So it is possible to make it work.
Thank you. And thank you for your candor, and it's brave to say that. We've also been asked about how do you ask a judge for access arrangements. we have 2 judges on the panel, so I'm really interested in that. I've never really thought about asking a judge for things. Certainly I'm an education law barrister mainly, and certainly I would say that those sorts of judges are pretty good because they're working with disabled children most of the time at getting things like breaks, time to write written submissions, that sort of thing. But I know that other areas may be less good or less aware at that sort of thing. So I'm really interested in your perspective, both of you, on that being on the bench and if and how people make applications for adjustments as practitioners. I know that you would almost certainly have dealt with applications from litigants and witnesses for adjustments, but I'm quite interested in applications for or awareness for from counsel themselves or representatives themselves.
Speaking for my practice or my judging, I sit as a recorder mainly at Central London doing Chancery, occasionally at Oxford doing non-Chancery, and I sit as an Insolvency and Companies Court judge in the Rolls building. And I don't think I have ever been asked for an adjustment for counsel. I think one of the reasons, probably in the Rolls building, to be fair, is that the courtrooms there are relatively new. There's good sight lines. So there's good sight lines. There isn't strange noises, which and I would pick them up first anyway, because one of my issues is extreme sensitivity to noise. I can hear a whispered conversation a mile away. So the courtrooms there tend to be quieter and it's much more structured. So I don't think it tends to trigger off problems in counsel as much as probably in family, where things tend to be a bit noisier and a little bit less controlled. So I've never had anyone ask me for any adjustments on a neurodiversity basis. I have had adjustments for somebody who had sight issues, and they sent a note through which they showed to their opposite number beforehand. They wrote a note, showed it to the opposite number, said, I want to send this through to the judge so that the judge knows that I have serious problems with my eyesight. I need to come a little bit closer. I need the judge to use my name when addressing me, because if you just say counsel, I don't know whether you're talking to me or the person on the other side, because I don't know who you're looking at. And that's the only time I've had, and I thought that was quite a nifty way of dealing with it. You can say something to an usher, I guess, but you're getting slightly Chinese whispers there. So the note, but you must share it. You must share it with the opposite number and say, this is what I'm doing, and this is why I'm doing it, and I want to send this note through. And even ask them to sign it so the judge knows that it's gone past the other counsel, because judges get very twitchy about notes coming from outside that haven't been seen by other people. So that's how I would deal with it, I think. But I've never had, other than that, I've never had a personal experience.
I've had a lot of adjustments for litigants in person in the family court, because that's something where you do get people who do need adjustments of all sorts, and that's before you start on special measures, which are also an issue. So in a way, the family courts are very much set up for anticipating that somebody is going to need something of some description. And then in terms of if it's counsel who need the adjustments, either they can send an email direct to the judge if they're already sending up documents, which quite often happens. If you're already sending in a written note, it can go on that, copied into your opposite number. But I think the more likely thing to happen is that they would simply say something to the court clerk. By the way, I'm going to need X, Y, Z. Hopefully in the hearing of their opponent, if they have an opponent, and then the court clerk will come tell the judge, and the judge should be able to make that adjustment, assuming that it's not something utterly outlandish. But if it's something fairly straightforward, then that can easily be done. But I think mostly where there has been requests for adjustments for neurodiversity, it's come from litigants in person. And at that point, I mean, you can do absolutely anything. I always have fidget toys in my bag anyway. So if somebody is really struggling to focus while they're giving evidence, I can give them something to use. Right down to if you've got somebody, this isn't so much a neurodiversity issue, but if you've got somebody with learning disabilities, they may need everybody at the same level rather than having one person sort of peering down at them. Down to really little things like not being difficult with somebody about putting their hands in their pockets, for example, or if somebody needs to keep something sort of over the top of their head. I think I'd draw the line at somebody wanting to come in with a full face covering, but certainly if somebody's unable to take their hat off without being caused significant distress, then fine. But yeah, it's tended to be litigants in person more than counsel so far. But I don't know, of course, whether that's just because counsel are too worried about the reaction they're going to get to actually say anything.
Or if it's not knowing what to ask for. I mean, I was thinking about the fact that most of my hearings are online. I'm thinking, what could I ask for? What would I need? Do I want more time? Maybe it's also because certainly in my area, judges tend to try and make it quite good for everyone. Because often on the other side of my cases, I'm against parents or local authority officers. And so it's not always needed to kind of have that sort of adjustment in place because it's already made accessible, sort of drop curve effect. I don't know if you have any views, Adam, on this.
Yeah, but depending on what type of case I do, because I've got a general common law practice, so I could on any given day be doing just about anything. I found that employment judges, by their very nature, because of course they're dealing with reasonable adjustments, they always ask in advance, and it just feels like a safer environment for counsel to say, I might need some more time to read this. I have myself in the past asked for adjournments if I'm handed something that I'm expected to read very quickly. It's not unreasonable to ask for time to do that. And I have never once had a judge refuse me that time either, although one hears stories, but I believe judges are broadly getting much better at understanding these things and being reasonable in the things that they grant people. So I suppose it's a case of not being afraid to please ask. I mean, an adjournment, a short adjournment's not that much. It'll come down to what's reasonable on the day. But I have advanced it on behalf of my clients, very rarely on counsel.
Wonderful, thank you. We've also had questions about how you deal with dysregulation in court. So, for example, if you have buttons pressed or you're getting overwhelmed in court, or you're getting angry or annoyed, or the judge is not understanding you, or you're constantly being interrupted by your opponent, all of those sorts of difficult things that may happen by virtue of doing this job. And certainly if you are someone who might struggle with that sort of overwhelm or get very rejection sensitive dysphoria, for example, maybe about losing a point or being interrupted or not being understood, these things can be exceptionally frustrating for all advocates, but even more so if you find that particularly difficult. And so I wondered if anyone had any tips for managing and dealing with regulation in a high stress environment of a courtroom or in a conference room with your clients.
Conference room's relatively easy because you can take a deep breath and say, need to go and see the clerks about something, which is my way out, or that you need to visit the bathroom and take a deep breath. It's much harder in court. I tend to go into a bit of an altered state in court, apart from my ADHD tendency to interrupt everybody. I'm usually one doing the interrupting, which I have to struggle with even now. I have to literally physically bite my lip sometimes. I've got a few sort of, I suppose I do some breathing techniques, which I tend to find helpful. A bit of, it's not really yoga breathing, but it's sort of similar, just you can do it quietly through one nostril and out the other one. And it's almost more like a distraction. If I can distract myself from how upset I'm getting in some way, I have my own stims. I tend to do this. You can always tell when I'm getting upset because I do this. And I think I just let myself do those and I try and distract myself. Or I look at my computer and I type, even if I'm not actually typing anything. It's something else to focus on rather than what's building up inside. I have never lost it in court, which I can't say about any other environment I've ever been in. I think there is something about being there that actually helps keep you down. It's afterwards.
Yeah.
It tends to be not in court. It's afterwards. You go back and you either go home and you explode at something, or you're shrieking in the car going home because somebody did something perfectly reasonable that you didn't like. So I think that's what I tend to push it off. And I think most people I know tend to do that. There's a suppression, and then you explode and you have to forgive yourself for exploding. But I don't think I've ever had too much of a problem in court itself. So I can't give you any other techniques other than the breathing and the distraction.
I've done it, yes. I've lost my temper in court, and immediately regretted it and asked for a brief adjournment. I was told to take all the time I need, and then I came back in and apologised for my intemperance, and asked that it not be taken out on my clients. The judge was, of course, offended at the very suggestion that it might be, and I think that's quite right too. But I've found quite similarly, just writing or even pretending to write is a good way to just distract myself if I'm losing my temper, or if I'm feeling frustrated or getting overwhelmed. But for the most part, it is a case of you sort of got your court persona on, whatever's happening behind that, I'm internalising and then let that out at a later stage. It's a tough job.
I think that I can see your hand is up. I promise I will come to you. I think that what both of you are touching on is the concept of masking as well. And
Yes.
And this can be something that is very difficult for many of us. And it does then mean that you may then burn out or scream into a pillow at the end of the day. And I think I agree with what we both of you said, but I think there does need to be you need to punctuate your day with those outlets and those regulation strategies. And that might mean movement breaks, fidget toys, leaning into what your body is asking for, tapping, EFT tapping, look into EFT tapping, I think the T is tapping anyway, whatever. Look into the sorts of strategies that might help you to regulate in that space. I have a post-it note on my laptop which says say it in closing, because I have the same tendency as you do to argue when I don't need to about an issue that I can say in my closing submission. So just I'm helped by the fact that I'm at home. I really am helped. I don't really know what it would be like if I was still where I was 5 years ago before children and back in the physical court environment. I'm only in court physically every once a month or so. So it works for me because I can, in the middle of the day, I can go have a shower. I can go walk my dog. I can hug my cat. Like, these are the things that I use to punctuate my day. And that sort of thing, you kind of need to outlet, because if you're masking all the time, you're going to get exhausted and you're going to burn out. So that's what I would say as well, is to find ways to regulate that work for you, that calm your nervous system in a position which you'll be in court, which is going to activate your nervous system in a way that is brilliant and exciting and amazing, but also, even if it's a really epic and positive experience, you're going to need to be able to come down and relax from that as well. I can see your hand was up at the back. I'm going to ask you to say your question, and I'm going to repeat it so people can hear it.
Thank you. So I've been masking for the last 15 minutes because I've been having half a dozen pressing questions.
Well done.
Thank you. But the challenge that comes with that is I've only listened to about 70% of what's been said. So doing that in a courtroom is quite challenging. So that would be, I think, my first and quite important question, and not to take away from my second question. Has anyone utilised access to work in regards to some form of support or assistance? And if so, how that works with inside chambers and the court?
Mm-hmm. So we were asked two questions for those who are on the live stream. The first was about what do you do in circumstances where your masking or your desire to ask questions in a hearing might mean that you're not then focusing fully on everything that's happening in the courtroom. You might not be able to concentrate on everything that's being said and follow everything that's being said all the time. And the second part was about access to work and whether or not you can use access to work arrangements to support in the courtroom environment or in your practice generally. And I would certainly say that I certainly find that first part about not always fully following what everyone is saying all the time to be something that I experience. I think that what we need to say is that most people are not concentrating all the time throughout the entire day of a court hearing. Like even neurotypical people, certainly not to the extent that perhaps you or I might experience, certainly not. But don't feel bad about the fact that you're not focusing on every single word that everyone is saying all the time, all the way through that day. Because there will be bits that are more important to really focus on, write down, get for your closing speech and so on. And there'll be other bits that you're less totally focusing on. So to make it more neutral, like don't feel bad about the fact that you're not able to listen to everything. That's okay, that's fine. We're interest-based creatures. We want to listen to the bits that are interesting. In your preparation, you will know, if you're well prepared, you'll know what the parts are that are really important. You also know the parts when people are going off on a tangent that is going to be less important. Doesn't mean you stop listening. I appreciate it's hard, but there will be times when what you're listening to, I don't know, say a litigant person goes off on a tangent and you know it's not going to be as important. I know that it's tricky because certainly for online hearings, you're not allowed to record or get a dictation on the what's happening. So I don't know if Julian, you have any ideas about getting a dictation on what's being said in the court, because I would love that, because then I could actually listen to and hear what's said, because they used to use that, and then they started to say you can't record or make any recording at all of anything to do with what's going on in an online hearing, and I stopped using my software that it wasn't very good, but it would at least kind of dictate onto Word what was being said, and then you could look back if it hadn't been following properly. So I don't know if about using closed captioning or similar in courtrooms.
Certainly closed captions that are automatic are absolutely fine because they're not stored. In terms of the first questions you asked, don't underestimate the value of a pencil and paper.
Yeah.
Because I know exactly what you mean. You're listening to somebody, sort of half listening to them, and then at the same time you're thinking of what your next question is going to be, what's your witness doing at the back of the court, what's your opponent saying right now, and it's very easy to get distracted. So what I've just done with your question is to actually write it down so that I wasn't then taken off on a total tangent by Ali as she answered it. So write things down.
Did you catch her answer then while writing the question?
Yes, that just takes practice.
Okay.
There is no substitute for just learning how to do that and being able to write and think at the same time. And in a way, I think neurodiverse conditions are actually a bonus to that, particularly for those of you with ADHD, because you can think, write, and probably do something else all at the same time. In terms of access to work, I'm not aware of any counsel who have it, but I am aware that it is something that's provided within the judiciary. I don't think I know of anybody with a neurodiverse condition who has got access to work support, but certainly other forms there are. And in terms of what Ali was saying about using a dictation machine during a court hearing, that's a really interesting one. My instinct on that, I mean, the answer is I'd have to go and ask a full-timer, which is the answer to a lot. But my instinct would be that if it was counsel asking for it and they had a good reason in terms of this is a disability adjustment, the answer would probably be yes, as long as you destroy it at the end and you give an undertaking to the call that you will do so. But don't quote me for certain on that, because I think that's something which you would have to go and ask whoever is the person in charge at any particular court hearing centre.
Can I also suggest one other thing that does take a little bit of work? Learn to touch type. I touch type, I'm quite fast, not particularly accurate, but I don't need to be accurate, I just need to understand. And it does two things. First of all, it gives me something else to do when I'm bored, and I do get bored in court. You know, my opponent's blethering on about something where I know they're wrong and I can't be bothered to argue with them, and I just turn off. I've turned off when judges have been talking, which is a really bad idea. But I find, because I touch type, which is basically, if you do it properly, you're not even thinking. I don't think about it. It's full touch typing. I'm quite fast now. And I find I've made notes of this really boring stuff without even realizing it. They're odd notes sometimes, and I don't actually remember having heard them. So it's another thing. It's one of the things I think that does help me get through some of the things. I find online hearings very hard.
Yes, I do.
I find online hearings very hard.
Happily abolished a lot of them.
Well, it's nice sitting at home. No, I love the sitting at home bit, and I love my noise cancelling headphones, which I have to say I think is an essential piece of kit. We're looking at an essential piece of kit. It's full noise cancelling headphones. It changes your life in so many ways. That bit I don't mind, but what I hate most about it is because I've got the noise coming directly through into my ears, whichever way I do it. And if my opposite number's got a really boring voice or one that sort of sounds like a buzzsaw, it's really physically painful. And that I do find difficulties. I tend to turn it down as low as I can without actually not being able to hear at all, which is quite dangerous.
I think that's really interesting, because I was thinking about doing what you've just suggested and typing, and then I was thinking about, I don't know, I'm getting really annoyed with the clackiness of my keys.
I can clack, but as long as you're not clacking.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
I can bang my own bracelet on the side here when I'm typing to my heart's content. Anybody else who even tinkles slightly, I get disturbed.
I totally, sorry,
The
I
other
just go on.
advantage of being able to touch type, because I can process things through the ears straight into
Yes,
the fingers,
exactly.
and it can almost kind of bypass the brain.
It does.
But the other thing, because you talked about emotional regulation in court earlier, that's not something I struggle with. I don't experience what other people do with anger. It's just not something I've ever experienced. But I do get frustrated, and I find that if my opponent, which can happen in deliberation, is making a particularly silly point, being able to just look at them whilst you type out what they're saying, quite satisfying.
I think this might lead to like a really useful point, which is about tech and optimizing your environment, your sensory environment. Because I'm thinking about my keyboard and how I hate my keyboard and I really want to change it. And I keep trialing different things, and my chair is uncomfortable that I sit on at work. And I know I need to fix my work environment at home. So I'm wondering if any of you have any advice for optimizing your work environment. What tools or software or devices do you use to help make your environment productive, efficient, comfortable for your sensory needs if you have them, and to make you good at being a barrister?
Standing desk.
Standing desk.
I find that if I am standing, particularly if I'm cross-examining, I don't miss things, so I can't zone out if I'm standing. Whereas if I'm sitting in the comfort of my own home and I'm sitting down, I seem to find, my brain seems to find it much easier to switch off. So I've got a standing desk and I use that quite a lot.
How about you?
I love my tech.
I know.
I'm known for loving my tech. It's something that helps, as I say, gives me dopamine hits, which is very nice. So I have everything. I have twin screens.
Yeah.
I have I have my electronic blue book. That's a remarkable. I don't know if you've come across
they're
these.
good.
They're fantastic. They are quite expensive. If you are somebody who writes and can actually read your writing more than 24 hours after you've made it. I'm not actually in that category myself, but I use it in other ways. You can get a little keyboard that works with it, but it doesn't work fast enough. But it's absolutely fabulous for just making notes, and then you keep your notes and they don't get lost in your handbag, or they're there all the time. You can pass them backwards and forwards to your client if you've got a client. So I love that. use quite a few apps that really, really help me in the way that I work, because I'm very visual. So I use Simple Mind Pro, which is a mind mapping one, very sophisticated mind map, where you can link things into documents. It's fun, it's sort of gamifying it as well. And then I have a visual representation of my case. I mean, it looks like a massive spider's track all over the place, but I know what it means. And I thoroughly recommend that to people who, like me, have a slightly chaotic mind, because you can throw things on and then draw links between them. So that really helps me. And the other thing, talking about desks and things, I have a really good chair. I spend money on myself and keeping myself healthy and sane, and that is something which, even when I didn't have much, that was the priority for me. And the other thing I have is an ADHD person, and I built this up without knowing I was ADHD, but having all those symptoms of forgetting things, leaving things behind. I mean, there are possessions of mine scattered between here and Edinburgh, and on trains. So I have 3 sets of everything, not three laptops, I just have one laptop. But I have 3 keyboards, I have 3 mice, I have 3 power cables. One's at home, one set's at home, one set's in chambers, the other set is my travel set. And if you can build up to that, and I built up to it, I think it's something that really works. I have my bag with my stuff in it for my travelling to court. I actually have an extra couple of, I have a screen that fits on here and gives me 2 extra ones. It's awesome. So all of that comes with me, so I can effectively set myself up wherever I am in a way that I'm comfortable, even in court. And if you can push yourself a little bit, even just to have 2 sets, because it does mean, and again, it may just be those of us who are ADHD who scatter things, I don't know, but for myself, it means that if I do happen to leave a lead behind, at court I was sitting at the Slough, and I left my cable, my lead there, I at least had another one at home that I could then use if I needed to. You need backups of things. And I'm going to reiterate it, I know I've said it, but spend money on yourself, you're worth it. You know, we're worth it, not in a silly sort of hair, makeup way, but in a way that's very fundamental, because in this profession, we have to look after ourselves to a very great extent. And that's one of the things you need to look at. And the other thing, I'm going to stop in a minute, the other thing is eat properly as best you can, because that's another thing. If you are short of food and you're in court and there's a tick, tick, tick going on behind you, and then your opponent says something you think is stupid, that's the moment you might break. So give yourself as few break points as possible and look after yourself.
Your question was also about access to work, and some of my our colleagues on the Neurodiversity and Law boards have experience with access to work arrangements. I haven't, but they're telling me that you can apply for a needs assessment, which may help with getting some of the technology that we're talking about. It will be on a reasonably required sort of proportionate basis. It may not be the sort of gold-plated, laptops in every room sort of brilliance that you might be able to build up to being able to put into place for yourself. But certainly with a good assessor who can look at these different things and find the right type of physical ergonomic stuff that you might need, or other tech dictation software, that sort of thing that you might need. I understand we can probably do another event on access to work, I think.
Literally just applied.
You did just apply. Oh, how interesting. There we
In
go.
context, I do have it, but I'm not yet filled out the application.
Got it. So that just for the benefit of everyone else on the stream, the chap at the back is saying he's just applied for access to work and hasn't yet been told.
No.
Or
Got the access
got
to
it.
work in, running it through as my own limited company,
as your own
consultant,
company. Got it.
and doing the bar course, applying for the bar. So my question is more about how chambers do it, how
I see.
how they move into it, and how acceptable, which would probably go into your question, is you just got an application in.
Yeah, literally just
So-
put my application in.
So how's your chambers taken into this?
Well, I dealt with it as an individual, so it's not really interfaced with my chambers yet. That's just where I'm at. Just as everyone should be aware of this as well, the Access to Work scheme. If you are neurodiverse, there's a government scheme to assist people with all reasonable adjustments and things that might help you having a leveling the playing field. You should all look into it. It's available for everyone. And it is excellent. I mean, I benefited, for example, from the disabled student allowance, is what it was called in my day when I was at university, and that gave me certain notation materials back when spell checkers weren't so advanced as they are now. Grammarly is phenomenal. Do not underestimate Grammarly if you have an issue with your spelling or your grammar. AI, I for one, I'm ready for our AI overlords. Also, this device is really helpful. My watch reminds me when to stand up and take a break, because EAT is a good piece of advice, because I will sit down at my desk at, say, 8 in the morning, and then the next thing I know, it'll be 8 the next morning, and I'll wonder, why haven't I stood up? What's going on here? Why have I got chronic back pain? What's all this about? But this device actually reminds me when to stand up and when to take regular breaks. It is important to take care of yourself in this job, because this job takes a lot.
My watch also tells me when it's time to drink, which is quite helpful.
Yeah,
It tells me
water.
when to breathe, which is very annoying. In terms of spending money on yourself, I absolutely agree with that. I'm very old-fashioned in terms of notes. I like blue, red and black pens and a piece of paper. That's how I organise mine. But I am now willing to spend money on sensory-friendly clothing so that I'm not permanently uncomfortable in court. And that really does. And also, don't be afraid to look a little bit different. Like, obviously, you don't want to look like a complete, sight. But on the rare occasions I have to wear a wig and gown, I cannot cope with the collarette that most women wear that crawls up with the Velcro up the back of your neck, like you're a sort of fuzzy felt animal or something. It's absolutely horrific. I don't know how women cope with it. So I wear these standard male collar and bands. I've never once had anybody say anything negative about that. And I was quite worried when I started wearing it that people would be a bit sort of, oh, what do you think you're doing? You're in the wrong uniform. But no, it's been absolutely fine.
I've actually always worn collar and bands because I hate the collar for exactly the same reason. Velcro and I are not good friends. It just makes me shudder thinking about it.
I would really recommend the website Sensory Direct. So it's something I came across with the clients that I work with who have disabled children, but it also has things that are accessible and useful for adults as well. So we'll have sensory compression clothing, sensory clothing. It'll have fidget toys galore. There's hundreds of them, all the way down to like £5 ones to like £50 ones. It also has bigger, more like sensory integration type equipment, so sensory swings. They're not just for children, trampolines, stuff like that to get your motor systems going and ready for work. There's sort of quite a lot of deep pressure devices on there. It's really about trialing what works for you. So some sensory toys or fidget toys or concentration toys are going to have the opposite effect and be unhelpful and kind of get you into a more stressed state, and others will be much better. You kind of have to work out if this is suitable to you, what textures, what things are going to help you feel regulated, and what's going to be kind of workable in a court environment, and what can you have maybe up to your desk or on your sleeve or something like that. That's not like a great big like fidget toy. But yeah, I mean, certainly you'll see barristers touch their pens and stuff, but I think it's about kind of working out what works for you. In my virtual hearings, I'm in a state of I put my legs very tight up into my desk, and I'm in a state of like deep pressure, holding myself in a very tight position. I have a note on my desk saying, relax out of that position, because I'm doing it automatically. I have a note as well that says, unclench your jaw. Things like that, or to remind yourself, unclench your jaw, drop your shoulders, take the tongue from the roof of your mouth.
like just giving yourself those reminders, because your body could go into that state of tension and you need to release it. So there's those things. And I certainly learned about those things through having a therapist who was ADHD informed, who was a psychologist who was really experienced in working with people who have ADHD or OCD and ASD as well, and it really helped me. And a lot of people here may have experienced therapy, may have also got comorbid mental health difficulties, is really common, and you may have gone through counselling or CBT or whatever and just thought, this isn't working, I'm not getting anywhere with this. So I'd really emphasise neurodivergent informed therapeutic approaches for people if you haven't tried them already. See if that type of approach works better for you. And with somebody who may themselves also be neurodivergent, that could be really useful and very affirming as you come through your journey with your diagnosis. Anything else on tech or on devices or anything else?
Can I add a low tech?
Low tech, yes. So low tech from the audience. Go on.
Working with children as well, there are things called nap patches. They're
Nap
tiny
patches.
little stickers you can stick on your clothing. Means you get the lovely, nice lavender, chamomile, whatever it is that works best for you. Works really well with children, especially when they're in the school and they need to concentrate. But the other piece of kit, which I absolutely love to bits, are little round, bouncy things. You stick them under the back of your chair, and you can fiddle around and move around and do all the things you would do as your ADHD without anybody knowing that that's what you need to do in order to stay concentrating on what's going on the screen in front of you,
Yeah.
or even just as you're at home, you know, doing something here and there. It's a physical thing, so simple, available for most children. So again, I think Chancery Direct is the main go-to website. There are bands you can put around
There are
on
bands.
chairs.
Yeah,
that you
I've
can
got one on my
stretch,
desk
you can-
between here and there.
You
Yeah.
can bounce your knees on them. So as you were saying, getting very tense during that. But the thing is really knowing and being aware of what you do so that you can leave yourself notes or Triggy or iWatch or send a little timer through saying, oh, it's time to take pills.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
So-
Drink water.
Brilliant. So someone in the audience, thank you so much, has said nap patches, which give a smell feedback of lavender to help you relax. You put them on your body. You also talked about, I think it was a wobble board or something similar.
No,
Is
they
it not a
are
wobble board?
literally kind of round things, and they've got a rubbery. Sorry, I'm not very good at explaining this, but it's got a rubbery end in it, so
Yeah.
that effectively you can bounce on the chair.
Interesting.
No
I
matter
can't
what
picture
kind of
this
chair
at all. I
it
don't know if
is.
anyone can visually picture this, but that sounds
But
amazing.
Yeah.
Okay,
no,
we'll
it's
send a
great,
tweet out with
especially
this.
if you need to kind of,
Fine. And had also suggested TheraBands. So some of you may use these for your own like exercises in the gym. They're really useful to put between chair legs and on your chair, or have in your bag as well, to kind of get that deep kind of pressure input and movement input. I learned a lot of this sort of stuff through working with occupational therapists who specialise in working with children with sensory processing needs. And that's how I worked out, oh, this is really applicable to me. So some of you may really benefit from an occupational therapy assessment, not just if you have sensory processing needs, but more broadly. So again, many chambers will have access to occupational therapy support who can provide advice more broadly. But certainly, again, going back to what I was saying about a neurodivergent informed OT, or in particular somebody who's going to be aware of sensory processing, can be very useful at giving you advice on what might work for you as an adult. And a lot of the things that are working for children are kind of filtering up into adults. So you may find that you learn a lot from, if any of you've got children or work in schools, that you can learn a lot from them about what they're using in the school environment and use that in your work environment as well. This is all stuff that's making children alert, ready to learn, zones of regulation, all of these sorts of systems that are in place in schools could really be rather useful for adults as well. So wonderful. Okay, so anyone else on tech or low or high tech devices? I don't know if anyone in the audience has got any other tech that we've not covered, or any other tips that we've not covered that are on that sort of topic.
I do have another app that I rely on a great deal, which is a timing app. It's a specific timing app. It's called timing.com. And although it's not perhaps necessarily timing.com. And what it does is it times everything you do, and you can set it up so that it will time specific cases for you. So you don't have to, as barristers, we don't have to fill in the times, but your clerks will say to you, you know, how much time did you take? How much time are you going to need? And as somebody who's ADHD, I have absolutely no proper sense of time. It takes as long as it takes. And if I'm deeply involved in it, I can't quite manage a 24-hour stretch, but I think I've managed pretty much 16 hours straight through. But if you'd asked me how long I'd been, I'd probably say, well, 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah.
So the timing app does two things. I think it pays for itself every year when I pay for it. It pays for itself pretty much in the first week.
Is it literally timing.com?
Yeah, I think that's right. We'll tweet it out.
Yeah.
I've got the link on here somewhere.
Yeah.
But it does two things. First of all, it actually tells me how much time I've spent on things. But it's also helped me when I've needed to give the clerks an estimate of how much time, because I realise how much I have undercharged over the years. I will have thought it's maybe 4 hours, 5 hours, and then when I actually go back and look at my timing app, I've spent 8.5 hours on it. Because when I'm enjoying myself, you know, 10 minutes, it feels like 10 minutes. Yes, I think it's that one.
Yeah.
It makes an enormous amount of difference to my purse. I do better. It's given me, I still have to check back with it on timing, but at least it's given me something to be able to quote properly. It's quite nice. It's also very funny because it picks up everything, and you get this sort of like timeline for the day, and it changes colour. And mine is a patchwork, continual patchwork, as I jump from one thing to another, pop over to look at my emails for 2 minutes. So from that point of view, it's also been quite helpful in helping me to learn to focus a little bit more, because I'm a bit more conscious now of just how often I break into my own concentration and go off and look at something irrelevant, simply because I'm maybe a slightly dull bit of my advice.
So I'm told that we have a video coming out about Grammarly tomorrow.
Oh, very good.
And after this, we're definitely we were thinking about doing a document before, but I said, let's hear what these guys got to say and what the audience got to say. We'll put something together for everyone on Thursday. I think we must do something on access to work generally, because I'm learning a lot about this. I need to do this. And also on all of this tech and high tech, low tech stuff that I think would be really useful. I did ask if anyone in the audience have any other ideas or any suggestions of things that they have used at all. I can see there's one person in the audience.
I didn't know that we could ask sort of judges to record and possibly destroy recording, but so I haven't used this in court. But I use it during lectures in the bar course. It's called Otter. And it's got really, really quite decent speech to text, almost perfect. It would just sort of mix up names that weren't in English usually, but otherwise very, very good at converting speech to text.
That's really cool. So Otter.ai.
Yeah, there's a paid version of it. Yeah, it's really, I find it.
And do you know how much it costs? Is it monthly subscription?
The second I had to pay for it as a student, I sort of forgot. But I think it is about, I want to say that it's about £8 a month or something.
Okay.
But I guess maybe that would fall under the sort of.
It could do, couldn't it?
It does. Yeah.
It goes back into that sort of investment in yourself sort of thing, doesn't it? Right. I'm writing this down so we can put it into the chat as well. Otter.ai.
Like Dragon text to speech as well. That was being in my day. It was being developed when I was a student, and now it's really very good. I mean, text to speech apps are really worth the time, I think.
Yeah. Certainly AI
effective.
generally is really fascinating. I mean, certainly going even in the last few weeks or so, I found it mind-blowing what it can do. And certainly in terms of ChatGPT for sort of even just thought initiation. I mean, I had a upper tribunal case that came back today, and I couldn't, for the marketing, work out a title for it, and I just was like, please help me with the title on this case, blah, blah, blah. And then it just sent me 5 titles, and I was like, brilliant. Now I don't have to waste, because I'm really excited. I won this case. I was like, oh, and I wasted an hour on trying to work it out. And then I was like, I'll use this. And you could just, it cuts through the wasting the time stuff and gives you just something pithy. Obviously be careful about not using it too much. The law on it is completely made up. But there is certainly lots of AI in the law that's very interesting. But please, as barristers, there is new guidance from the bar standards boards on the use of AI. You must read it. But it's used with caution, but it is also amazing and innovative as well. Julian.
2 things on sort of wasting an hour on one title. One thing that I've just been sort of experimenting with, because I'm not particularly high tech, is Goblin tools, I think it's called. And you can ask this Goblin thing to break down the...
into smaller pieces.
Yeah, you can ask it to break down the task for you. So if you're struggling with executive functions, they're getting started on a task and sort of, where do I start? And it's that sort of, I know it needs to end up finished, but where do I start and what are the steps in the middle? I forgot what it's called. It's Goblin.
It's Goblin.tools, and it breaks down the
Goblin.tools.
task into like 5 steps, and then you're like, break it down more, break it down more.
Break it down more and more and more. So you can just have a look at it in terms of asking it how to do the washing up, and you'll see how it breaks it down into these different steps. That's very useful. And the other thing that I find useful is like an old-fashioned kitchen timer. Just start it for 10 minutes and tell yourself, I'm just going to write something. It doesn't have to be any good. I'm just going to start it off with this timer, and then usually when the timer goes off after 10 minutes, I'm now absorbed into it and I've got on with it. So I find that quite helpful to just overcoming inertia.
Yeah, definitely when you're like, I've got 10 things to do as well. I found ChatGPT, I've also asked it to like write me a schedule as well, and I'm like really worried about what I have to do. It's not that good yet, but it's certainly getting better. I wonder if this actually might be even better at helping structure your day when you just like, I don't know what to do, I'm super overwhelmed with
I
that.
use something called Kanbana as well, which is a Japanese-based, very, very simple task. It literally is, you just write out the different tasks and you have columns, and in the to-do column you should never have more than 3 tasks. So, and you pick those tasks and you do them, and then you can swish them into the next column. It's quite fun to sort of set up.
It
is.
What's it called?
It's called Kanbana.
Kanbana.
Would you like sharing all those?
Yes,
I'm typing them to my colleagues who are trying to put them into the chat as well.
Right in the back of the room?
Yeah.
And again, you can do things if you're that way inclined. I like to colourify everything, so I have different colours for chambers work and homework, and I only ever have one to-do list. I only ever have one diary.
Yeah, work and personal diary, make it the same
You
diary.
must
was the tip I got
keep
recently.
it on your same diary because you forget.
I can see your question.
Sorry, you can tell I've got ADHD, full of the other thing to know and be aware of as people who have neurodivergence is that we approach a task by diving in the middle. That's where we have difficulty setting out start, middle and end of this process into these steps. So these tips are absolutely amazing, but non-neurodivergent people approach task and jobs like this in a completely different way to us. This was one of the most amazing kind of like, wow, you mean I was causing my own difficulty by jumping in the middle and then working out sideways what to do next. A bit like drawing your mind maps. Just being aware.
You jump in the middle with that and then fill in the sides.
Exactly. Just being aware of that and knowing that when you go to this job, you've picked out the sexy bits rather than all the boring bits that need to be done first, can just help you understand, okay, stop, let's concentrate on this for a moment because I know I'm not very good at ordering my day. And that's one of the reasons, most of the reasons why people, certainly with ADHD, tend to be in a mess and constantly zipping around from here to there to otherwhere. No judgment involved, no disrespect, but just being aware of that as you, with a divergence, go into something, helps you to understand that that's not how other people work as well.
Yeah.
And that's really important when you're trying to persuade another person, your solicitor, your clerk, or whoever else, that this is what you'd like them to do.
Wonderful, thank you for that. So we're approaching 7:30, and there's certainly plenty more that I'm sure that we would all love to say. What we'll do after this, we've got many ideas. I can see some of my colleagues on our group chat are giving even more ideas. I'm told Chris says brain in hand is one that you all need to know about as well. So I don't know much about that, but he's evangelical about it. So have a look at brain in hand as well. I think because we're nearly 7:30 and we've got to wrap up by 8 o'clock, and I want to give time for people to chat with each other and have conversations with us one-on-one if that's easier for you, is whether any of you have a sort of final big tip or a big trick for our audience tonight, or any kind of lasting message you want to give to practitioners and hopeful practitioners here in the room.
I'd just like to come back, if I may, to the very first question. I think we've gone through it, and I think it's quite obvious that yes, you can be a barrister who is neurospicy. And it has enormous advantages and disadvantages. And in that way, we are not so different from people who are neurotypical, because they have advantages over us, but disadvantages. Ours perhaps mirror image them or reverse image them. So I would say don't go away thinking that because you're neurodivergent, it's this massive wall of a problem. It's not, it's just a part of who you are. You can work around it. I became a judge, I became a barrister later in life than I will ever admit. I became a judge. I was actually, at one stage, I was sitting in 4 jurisdictions, all without knowing I was ADHD. And I did develop a lot of coping mechanisms without knowing what I was actually doing. So it's not, don't look at it as a massive problem. It's not what you are, it's a part of who you are. And you can be incredibly successful. Like this.
That was exactly what I wanted to say. So I couldn't have said it in a more eloquent way. Everyone should be their authentic selves and just accept this is just a part of you. You don't know how anyone else thinks anyway.
Yeah.
You know,
I think,
you do you.
Yeah. And harness your strengths.
Yes.
Because there will be things about you that are unique and will allow you to connect with your clients in ways that are going to be unrivaled and brilliant and make you fantastic barristers. You may find that parts of what we're saying are making you feel like this is all big problem, it's all really hard. And I certainly have experienced throughout this talk, I felt like, oh God, these guys are doing so much better at this than I am. I get that. And I suspect that some of you in this room are thinking, oh God, I'm not doing very well at this. We're all doing really well. It's really hard in this world that we're living in. It's not designed that well for people like us. And it is part of our job and part of what we're doing as an organisation to make it more accessible, make it better for people like us. But also it's about harnessing our strengths as well as recognising the things that we find more difficult and capitalising on those brilliant and beautiful parts of our minds as well.
I think mine would be similar to that, but I think what I would say would be don't be afraid to take ownership of your neurodiversity as well. And I'm going to finish on an anecdote that I never thought I would tell in public, because it was just one of those that sort of grips you by the centre of shame. One of the things that I suffer with is face blindness, which means I don't always recognise people out of context. So I've been at the upper tribunal, I've had this case had been going on for ages. We've been successful. My client was delighted. She went out the room actually whooping into the corridor, which was quite nice to see. She could not have been happier. I went home with the happy memory of a job well done. The following week, I'm back in court. Another barrister comes and sits down next to me at the back of the court, and he says, your client was happy last week. And I think, I don't have a script for this. I don't know what he's saying. what's the appropriate thing to say back? And I thought, yes, we just won. And then I thought, oh God, no, that sounds really big-headed. I can't say that. I thought about, you run all these things through the computer of what should I say next? How will that go down? And in the end, I thought, okay, I need to go for, yes, she was happy that she won, but I also need to say something really self-deprecating. So I said, it was quite a difficult case. I had told her that it's going to be a struggle. We were really lucky with the judge. And then another barrister came and sat down next to us and said, "You're not sitting today, sir." And I suddenly realised that the reason that he'd known that my client was so happy was that he was, in fact, the judge who'd heard the case. So I went outside and cried. Waited for him all morning while he did his case. And when he came out, I said to him, "I am really sorry, I'm autistic, I'm face blind. I was trying to find the right thing to say. I have a feeling I just put my foot in it terribly badly. I am so sorry." And he was absolutely adorably lovely about it. So my fears about how I was just about to be defenestrated from the upper tribunal came to nothing. And now I can laugh about it, but it's taken a little while. So, if things happen as a consequence of your neurodiversity that you were not expecting, they are not insurmountable, even if they feel like it's at the top.
All right, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm sure some of you will have questions. If you want to come directly to us and ask them, that would be amazing. We have another event on Friday, which is like a networking event called NeuroConnect. It will be at Pegasus, which is the bar in the middle of in a temple. It has an outdoor area and an indoor area. We'd love to see you there. You can sign up on our website, neurodiversityandlaw.co.uk, and meet other people and have more informal discussions with us and with others who are similar to you. It's a really nice opportunity to meet other people in this area. So yes, thank you so much.